Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are diving deep into an incredibly pressurized cultural corner, the pervasive and often silent expectation placed on boys and men to suppress emotion.
That's right. It's this legacy that teaches them that strength means silence. And we're going to look at the staggering price that's paid for that idea.
And that price is, well, it's paid in mental health, instability, and in relationship quality.
It is. We've compiled several powerful sources for this deep dive, anchored really heavily in the work of educational psychologist Dr. Shungu H, whose research clearly charts the path of this suppression.
Exactly. So our mission here is to explore this kind of revolutionary concept that vulnerability isn't weakness.
No, it's an act of profound courage.
It is. And we're going to use the 6 stages framework, which we'll walk through later, to map that journey from emotional resistance to, healthy expression.
The big question we're wrestling with today is, what happens when entire generations are denied basic permission to be human?
It seems to start so early.
Oh, it does. The core problem the research identifies is that boys are consistently and often subtly driven toward this belief that showing emotion, asking for help, or displaying any kind of vulnerability is inherently a weakness.
And so the response is just suppression.
It's the only logical response. They learn, often before they can even articulate it, to just hold it in, swallow their feelings, and carry everything alone.
And the mental health impacts are just severe, not just for the individual, but for the communities they inhabit.
Well, of course.
When emotions, which are, at the end of the day, just energy and motion, are repeatedly pushed down, the result is this profound disconnection.
Disconnection from themselves, because they lose the ability to read their own internal state, and disconnection from others.
Because they can't share who they really are.
We see that disconnection manifesting statistically, too. The sources detail rising levels of psychological distress among young men. Stress, anxiety, emotional burnout, addiction.
And because they lack the vocabulary for it, they retreat.
They retreat. But this isn't always into a quiet corner. It's more of a functional isolation, often through numbing behaviors.
That's a key distinction. So it's not just withdrawing socially.
No, it's about finding coping mechanisms that are, frankly, easier than feeling the internal pressure.
Right.
Because they were never given the words or the permission to express what they're feeling, whether it's sadness, fear, insecurity. They just seek immediate relief.
So we see many turning heavily to screens, immersive gaming.
Exactly. Or other forms of digital escape. It's a form of self-medication, really. When you can't name the anxiety, you distract yourself from it until it's submerged, at least for a little while.
So through the lens of Dr. Magadz's research, that coping behavior is a symptom, it's not the cause.
Absolutely. The research is so critical on this point. These behaviors are not indicative of a moral failure or some inherent weakness.
No.
They are the predictable outcomes when a person is emotionally illiterate and, operating without permission to be human. The system failed to equip them, and the result is this massive internalized burden.
That structural failure just makes you realize the high cost. So if that's the internal toll, how does this learned suppression manifest when these men grow up and try to navigate something as complex as an adult relationship?
And this is where the suppression moves from an internal crisis to an external one. The sources draw a very clear line between this and a difficulty forming healthy, intimate connections.
Because if you can't regulate what's happening inside you,
you default to trying to regulate the world outside of you.
Which means control.
Exactly. We see struggles manifesting as chronic anger, rigid control, or just general relationship difficulties. If a man hasn't learned to manage sadness or fear, those feelings often get translated into the one emotion that's socially acceptable for him.
Aggression.
Aggression or dominance, yes.
So when that pattern lands on the most extreme end of the spectrum, what do we see? I think this is where we get into the negative axis of that 6 stages framework.
On that far negative axis, we see a complete emotional shutdown. The research notes that these individuals may become deeply disconnected, unable to empathize, and in severe cases, exhibit domineering or even violent behaviors.
Because they're operating from a state of fragility?
Constant internal tension and fragility. If every vulnerable feeling has to be crushed, then the person expressing that feeling, like a partner or a child, can be perceived as a threat to their whole constructed identity.
That's a profound insight. The inability to handle their own emotional landscape means they can't tolerate it in others.
Which makes intimacy impossible.
Right, because intimacy requires mutual vulnerability.
It's the core tragedy. They are often fundamentally unable to build healthy, loving relationships because they were never taught the prerequisite skills. Intimacy is built on emotional safety, and if you haven't granted yourself that safety, you certainly can't offer it to another person.
That is a heavy truth. So if that's the negative end of the spectrum, the problem isn't just managing symptoms, it's about fundamentally reversing the cultural current. How does Dr. Magadzi's work propose charting a path toward emotional intelligence and really emotional survival?
The shift has to begin with fostering emotional intelligence. I mean, completely and unapologetically. This means dismantling the old restrictive definition of strengths and just replacing it.
So what's the new definition?
The new definition the sources champion is simple but pretty radical. Vulnerability is courage. Affection isn't weakness. It is the truest expression of courage, strength, and humanity.
That shift from reactive management to proactive resilience feels so necessary. Okay, let's look at the 3 actionable steps detailed in the source material. Number 1, teaching boys and men that feelings are information, not failure.
They're just data points. Feedback loops that tell you what you need, what a situation requires. They're valuable.
The second action is helping men name what they feel, which it sounds simple, but I think that's a huge hurdle, going beyond fine or mad.
It is intensely difficult because society often only gives men 2 acceptable channels. Neutral, which is fine, or dominant, which is mad. We have to provide the entire lexicon.
Like apprehensive, grieving, lonely.
Exasperated. The sources stress that until you can name a feeling, you can't process it. You can only react to it. So expanding that emotional dictionary is a massive step.
And the third action is normalizing affection, tenderness, and crucially, normalizing the act of asking for help.
And we have to stress the urgency here. Every single moment of emotional presence, a casual hug, a gentle touch between a father and son, a kind word, it's so much more than just love.
It's prevention.
It's prevention. It's healing. It is hope. It's actively engineering a new reality that can break that generational cycle of emotional isolation.
I think that framework, that blueprint, is what makes this deep dive so powerful. The 6 stages framework charts that progress. Let's walk through it because it provides a map for everyone listening.
Exactly. It's a continuum, and we start at the far end of the resistance, that negative axis we talked about.
Tell us more about stage -2.
This is the defensive and dismissive stage. This is marked by active hostility toward vulnerability. The core belief is rigid. Real men don't cry, and they certainly don't show affection.
So they're not just avoiding it, they're actively rejecting it.
Actively. They'll often mock it or belittle it in others to reinforce their own defensive wall. They're constantly policing the masculinity of everyone around them.
Wow, that sounds exhausting. Okay, then we shift slightly to stage -1.
Stage -1 is unaware and resistant. So the active hostility has softened to discomfort. This is the person who says, maybe gently, I'm just not used to that kind of thing.
So they aren't mocking the hug, but they are awkwardly avoiding it.
They're avoiding it. There's real discomfort. They genuinely don't know what to do with their hands in a moment of intimacy.
Okay, that leads us to the critical midpoint, stage 0, the passive stage.
Right, stage 0 is passive and observing. This person has stopped actively rejecting emotion, but they haven't started practicing it. Their mindset is something like, I don't really do hugs, but I don't mind watching others do it.
So they see the value in it for others.
They recognize the value, yes, but they still see themselves as spectators in emotional connection. It hasn't become necessary for them personally.
And this feels like the critical juncture, because stage 0 is stable, maybe safe, but ultimately lonely. So what happens to cross that threshold into the positive axis?
That jump to stage +1 is often the hardest. Stage +1 is aware and curious. Something shifts. A relationship crisis, the birth of a child, a mental health low point that forces them to reflect.
And they start to think.
They start to think, maybe I could be more affectionate. Maybe this actually matters. This curiosity is so powerful because it lets them see the lack of connection in their own lives and begin that slow, sometimes awkward process of experimenting with openness.
Once that curiosity becomes action and responsibility, we hit stage +2.
Stage +2 is advocating and modeling. This is a generational shift stage. Men here reflect deeply on their own childhood, what they were denied, what they struggled with, and they realize they have a responsibility to change the future.
These are the ones who want to raise emotionally literate boys.
Exactly. And they start modeling that behavior even when it feels unnatural or difficult for them.
They are consciously unlearning decades of conditioning. And finally, the ultimate goal, stage +4.
That's active expression. These men have fully integrated emotional connection. Vulnerability is no longer a performance or a tool. It is just a way of life. They model it freely. They cry when they're sad. They show affection. They ask for help. This framework provides so much hope because it shows that change is a learnable process.
That structural path is so reassuring. It takes this abstract idea of be more vulnerable and turns it into concrete steps. But as you said earlier, this isn't just a conversation for fathers and sons.
No, absolutely not. We have to expand the scope to see the universality of these gender expectations. Many girls and women are also taught versions of this. That crying is a weakness, that you must always be composed.
The restrictive box is just shaped differently.
Exactly.
And most importantly, we need to talk about how everyone unintentionally reinforces these narrow masculinity stereotypes. It's not just men pressuring other men, it's cultural osmosis.
It truly is. We often accidentally reinforce that stage -1 or -2 behavior without even realizing it. For instance, if a male friend expresses deep sadness, the instinctive reaction from anyone, male or female, might be discomfort.
Or to say something like, suck it up, or be the man.
Right? Why? Because his sadness might feel unfamiliar or overwhelmingly large, especially if we've never seen it modeled safely.
Or that subtle cue when a child falls to tell a little boy, big boys don't cry, while you comfort the little girl. It's built into daily life.
That's the silent language of the negative axis. If we, regardless of our own gender signal discomfort, when a man expresses something authentic, we actively push him back down that continuum. We reinforce the idea that silence is safety.
So we all have a responsibility to cross into that stage +1 awareness.
Yes. And progress in this framework isn't about blame. It's about acknowledging these patterns and taking responsibility for our own actions and reactions.
Change begins when we all pause, notice these patterns, and choose a different, more courageous response. A response that invites honesty instead of demanding containment. It is not a weakness to feel, to cry, or to need support.
It isn't.
As the sources beautifully illustrate, this vulnerability is not merely permissible, it is the fundamental path to connection and resilience.
It is the ultimate expression of internal strength. And if you followed us on this deep dive today, thinking about these stages and the immense costs of silence, we want to leave you with a vital and provocative question, a challenge posed by the research for you to reflect on.
What concrete step can you take this week to help the boys and men in your life feel safe enough to be emotionally honest?